BearSkills.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my guide for the Marauder. This guide should cover everything you guys are going to need to know when playing the Marauder, and hopefully it will help you guys out in your matches. So we're going to have a overview of the class, a look at the abilities, how the class power and the rage are going to work, as well as some general tips and strategies strewn throughout the video, and at the end. So, jumping into the overview, the Marauder is going to be an offensive class out of the three, but it's also going to be very flexible. It has two unique abilities, Frostbolts and Gust. We'll cover those in just a moment. I want to mention this class has 125 health, meaning it has the most health out of all the classes. For reference, the Windguard has 100 and the Phantom has 75. The Marauder also has a really strong passive. Anytime you get a kill or an assist, and this applies to NPCs such as the gold carriers as well as enemy players, all of your cooldowns will be fully recharged. So really strong passive, really fits with that theme of unrelenting offense and continue hunting. So one last thing for the overview. The Marauder is particularly strong in Spoils of War and Carnage. So we'll talk about why in a little bit, but if you are a fan of those two game modes, the Marauder is a great choice for those. So let's jump into the abilities here. So we have Frostbolts and we have Gust. So Frostbolts, these can slow enemy movement. They have high shield damage, and generally it's going to be your offensive ability. Now, Gust is going to be more of your defensive ability. It will destroy projectiles, and its stamina recharge feature is essentially how that works. Is when you use Gust, it will destroy any projectiles currently targeting you, and when you do that, for every projectile you do destroy, you will get stamina back. So if, for example, you are missing all of your stamina, and there are 4 fireballs coming towards you, and you use Gust, it will recharge 4 stamina bars back. So really nice. Gust is a great defensive tool. Frostbolts is a very good offensive tool. In the background right now, you guys should see me using Frostbolts. They do incredibly high shield damage. Very nice for taking people's shields out. And if you can actually manage to do some damage to the actual health of the enemy, the Frostbolts will cause the enemy to have sluggish movements. It will be a debuff. I do want to mention this debuff will be reduced on Windguards due to their passive ability that negative status effects are shorter on them. So it won't be quite as effective on Windguards, but it will still be nice to have their movement slowed. It should make it easier to track them and hopefully finish them off if given the opportunity. And Frostbolts obviously is going to be more of your offensive ability. Keep in mind the class power of the Marauder is all about offense as well. So if you choose Frostbolts over Gust, you're not going to have much of a defensive tool at your disposal. So when it comes to avoiding damage, that's going to be based off of your movement, and you're not really going to have any extra help for that. Now, if you'd prefer a more defensive ability, Gust is a great choice. It's very simple and easy to use. As soon as you see that you have indicators showing you that you have fireballs or projectiles of any sort coming to you, you can activate Gust, get your stamina back, destroy those projectiles, and not have to worry about that damage. You can have up to 2 charges on Gust, and both charges are restored every time your passive is activated. So Gust is very, very strong. If you do struggle with stamina management, the Marauder is a great class to learn how to manage your stamina a little bit better, because you do have Gust to give you another option to restore your stamina. That's the abilities. Pretty simple for the most part. Like I said, Frostbolts, if you want more of an offensive playstyle, just keep in mind you don't have much defense at that point. And then Gust is a great defensive option. So if you are wanting a little bit more to escape from damage, maybe you're not quite comfortable with your movement yet to dodge projectiles, Gust is a great option. So moving into the class power. So the class power of the Marauder is Hunter's Mark. What this does is when you activate it, it'll throw out a little marking fireball. There should be a clip in the background right now showing that off. And once they're marked to that enemy and that enemy alone, you have infinite fireballs. These fireballs do track a bit better than the regular ones. but they are going to be lower damage. So something to take note of is it's going to take a lot more of them to actually take down your opponents. Um, and while you do have infinite fireballs, that is only against the opponent you have marked. So if for some reason you lose your enemy, whether they become untargetable or they simply escape, you're going to want to cancel your ability because at that moment they're the only person you can target. So you won't be able to target any other enemies if you have the Hunter's Mark out and hound somebody. So class power, pretty simple for the most part. Talking a little bit more about it, you want to be a decent little distance away from your enemies when you're activating it. In close quarters, it's not a great ability because it's hard to hit fireballs in close proximity. And with the Hunter's Mark, you're going to be having less damaging fireballs, so it's going to be even less value. So at that point, you're pretty much stuck with only using your Flame Breath. So you're better off to just cancel your power. What you really want to do is you want to be behind, maybe even a little bit above your enemy if possible, not too much, but you want to be behind your enemy, and you want to be at a distance to where you can get a lot of fireballs launched at your opponent. The more, the better. Um, and you want to be at a decent distance away because if you're really close, it'll be harder to track them. But you don't want to be too far away either, otherwise they'll have way more time to get away from there. As you guys play Marauder a little bit more, uh, it gets a little easier to find that sweet spot of distance. But essentially, you want to be just far enough away to where you're not hitting them with like 1, 2. You want to be just far enough away to where you can get like 4 to 5 going at once before they start getting hit. That way, it's kind of a momentum thing. They get hit by one, and then they start getting hit by all the rest of them. But pretty simple for the class power. Uh, Nothing too crazy or different, unlike the Phantom going invisible or the Wind Guards surging across the map to heal and help their teammates. Just kind of gives you a little bit different ability with your Fireball. Now moving into the Rage of the Marauder. The Rage is pretty simple. It doesn't do a lot. Essentially what the Rage does is it marks all enemies on the map with your Hunter's Mark, and kills can increase the duration. Other than that, it doesn't do anything. Keep in mind you cannot cancel your ability. Once you have raged it, you will need to wait out the full duration before it can be taken off, essentially. So rage, not near as changing or game changing as like the berserk buff that the Wind Guard can give or the invincibility the Phantom can have. It's very straightforward with the Marauder. Now, jumping into some general tips. Um, if your target becomes untargetable, whether that is the smoke of a Wind Guard or a Mystic Shroud of a Phantom, you're going to want to cancel your power. If your power is on somebody that you cannot target, it's being wasted, and therefore your time is being wasted because then you cannot target anyone else. Obviously, other than the rage, because everyone's marked then. But if that happens, you're going to want to pick a different target. So just make sure you're canceling your power often if it's not in an ideal situation. If it's going to be too hard to get that kill or you're going to have to overcommit to get it, you're better off to cancel it and put it on an enemy that is a bit more out of position and get value there. Another thing I want to mention is this does apply to all classes, but it is particularly important on the Marauder because of how many fireballs they're shooting out, especially with their class power. Speed of your dragon increases projectile speed. So if you're boosting, your fireballs are going to be going at the max speed. It's a lot faster than if you're not moving around at all a lot. If you're not really moving, your fireballs are going to be very, very slow and way easier to avoid. So the faster you are going, the harder your fireballs are going to be to avoid. Something else, combining your Rage as the Marauder with the Berserk buff that you either get from taking down a Berserk Wraith in Carnage or from a Wind Guard Raged ability giving you that buff. Combining Rage and Berserk is super nice. Berserk gives you really high damage fireballs and an infinite source of them, essentially. If you use the Rage, all the enemies are marked with your Hunter's Mark, and you still get the benefits of the Hunter's Mark. You get the better tracking fireballs and the ability to shoot them out at a faster rate. So that both those things combined with the Berserk's extra damage on your fireballs, and you're going to be really set. You can do a lot of damage. You can get a lot of kills doing that. That's very effective. Now, another tip I want to give you guys is to use Gust to tank. So earlier in the overview, I said that the Marauder was offensive but flexible. Now, the reason I say this is because he has access to Gust and also has the most health out of all the classes. Essentially, this gives the Marauder the ability to have two really different playstyles. You can either play really aggressive, try and burst people down. For that, you might want to take Frostbolts, or you can take more of a kind of class that can do some damage, but can also be really supportive to the teammates. So, for example, in Gates of Fire, the flag runner cannot use their abilities, but you can follow close behind your teammate that is running the flag. And if you're Marauder, you're going to have both a large amount of health, and if you take Gust, you'll have that, which means if you fly right behind your teammate, enemies are going to try to get to them. They're going to have to mostly go through you to get to the teammate most of the time. And then that means you can use Gust to dissipate a lot of the fireballs or other projectiles such as Frostbolts. And because you already have a larger amount of HP, that means you can tank just a little bit longer as well. So that's going to be able to buy your teammates a little bit more time. This also applies in Spoils of War. So if you're trying to help a teammate tank for them so that they can get the gold back, or they can run the jewel a little longer, or maybe get the key a little bit further away from the enemies, it's very effective that way. Essentially, you can play the Marauder as a bit of a support, but offensive support, whereas the Wingard's more of a defensive support in a lot of ways. You can play the Marauder spreading your damage around to all the enemies. Because you'll be getting assists, your passive ability is going to be activating a lot, meaning you're going to have all of your abilities recharged constantly. If you're taking Gust, that means you can constantly be dissipating fireballs. If you're taking Frostbolts, that means you can be constantly doing damage. And that also means your class power is also always going to be available for the most part. So it's really nice. You don't always have to get kills with the Marauder to be valuable to your team. A lot of the times, just spreading the damage around, putting pressure on a multitude of the enemy can be really effective. Now, Marauder, I mentioned earlier, was really strong in Spoils of War. Reason being is its class power, the Hunter's Mark, is very strong against the NPCs, and Gust is also amazing. Essentially, with the class power, you can mark the gold carriers, and you can burst them down really, really quickly. And then you can use Gust in order to ensure you don't take damage on the way back to your base with all that gold. So it can be very effective to combine those two things. A lot of the times when I play Marauder, I don't necessarily go for kills or that sort of thing. A lot of the times I will spread my damage out. I use Gust to tank for my teammates whenever I can, if they're running the objective or anything like that. And it works out really well. You can definitely get high scores on your team. And if you would prefer a more offensive style or approach, you definitely can do that. Especially if your movement is on point, you can take Frostbolts, take people's shields down really quickly. If their shield's already down, you can slow their movement down, making it easier to track them, which would mean they're easier to hit with fireballs, and Flame Breath should make the kills a little bit easier to get. So there's not as much to cover with the Marauder. The Rage is very simple. It doesn't add a ton of things like the other two classes do, because the other two classes, their Rage really changes their ability, whereas it just kind of amplifies the Marauders. And the class power is, it's just building upon, your fireballs and such, and, basically stuff like that. So, not as much to cover with the Marauder. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Just remember, Frostbolt's more of your offensive ability. Gust is great for defense. And don't forget, Gust replenishes stamina for every projectile destroyed. A lot of people seem to forget about that, but it is really important. The passive is really strong. Having your abilities active and ready constantly is super powerful. And having a lot of HP on the class can mean that you can stay in combat for a little bit longer than, say, other classes like the Wingard or the Phantom can. So, a few things to keep in mind. And, like I covered some general tips, make sure you're canceling your power. That way you are spending your time as maximized on being uh, proficient with your time as possible. Because, you don't want to have your power on somebody who you can't target if you could have it on somebody you could target. So, hopefully this was helpful. If it was, make sure to give the video a like. If you're new to the channel, always consider subscribing, as it does help the channel out a ton, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.